The forest floor pulsed with light from beneath the soil. At first, I thought it was a trick of the eyes, one of those fleeting impressions you get when dusk settles unevenly between the trees. The ground was mottled with roots and leaf rot, patches of damp earth reflecting what little light remained in the sky. But this wasn't reflection. It came from below. A dim, steady glow that rose and fell like breath. "Do you see that?" Lena asked. She was crouched near the fire pit we hadn't lit yet, her hand hovering just above the ground as if she expected warmth. The others gathered slowly, drawn by the same quiet wrongness. No one spoke for a moment. The forest had gone still in a way that didn't feel natural. Even the insects, those constant, invisible presences, had faded out, leaving a thin, hollow silence. The light pulsed again. It wasn't bright, not enough to illuminate the campsite fully, but enough to outline the veins of roots beneath the soil. For a moment, I could see them clearly, like a negative image, branching structures stretching in all directions, faintly luminous, then gone as the light receded. "It's got to be some kind of fungus," Mark said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Bioluminescent, like that stuff you see on rotting wood. It's under the soil," Lena said. "Look." She brushed away a thin layer of leaves. The earth beneath was darker, moist. As she cleared more, the next pulse came, and the light shone through the thin layer of dirt, diffused but unmistakable. It wasn't scattered randomly. It followed lines, patterns. I felt it then, not through my eyes, but through the soles of my boots. A faint tremor, barely perceptible, synchronized with the light. A low, slow thrum that seemed to rise from deep underground. "Did you feel that?" I asked. No one answered right away. Then, quietly, "Yeah," from somewhere behind me. The air had cooled, not the natural drop that comes with nightfall, but something sharper, localized. It clung to the ground, rising in thin currents that brushed against our ankles. I became aware of my breathing, how loud it sounded in the quiet. Each inhale seemed to disrupt something, like ripples in still water. The light pulsed again, slightly brighter this time, and closer. I stepped back instinctively, but the glow followed, spreading beneath the surface in branching arcs. It wasn't random, it adjusted, as if it knew where we stood. "That's not normal," Lena said, unnecessarily. Mark laughed under his breath, a brittle sound. "Yeah, no kidding, we should have left then. Packed up, walked back to the car, driven until the trees thinned and the ground felt like something we understood again." But there's a kind of inertia in moments like that, a reluctance to abandon the familiar shape of a situation, even as it begins to unravel. "It's probably reacting to pressure," Mark said, trying again. "Our weight, vibrations." As if to test it, he shifted his stance, pressing his boot more firmly into the soil. The response was immediate. The light surged, a brighter pulse that spread outward from beneath his foot, racing along those root-like structures. The ground trembled more noticeably this time, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to hum in my bones rather than my ears. Mark froze. "Okay," he said slowly. "Okay, that." The light pulsed again before he could finish, but this time it didn't recede fully. It lingered, a dim afterglow tracing the patterns beneath the earth. I realized, with a tightening in my chest, that the patterns weren't just roots. They intersected too cleanly, curved too deliberately. "Those aren't plants," Lena whispered. The thought had already formed in my mind, but hearing it aloud made it solid. Real. The lines beneath the soil formed something like a network, but not one I could easily categorize. It spread outward in layered strata, some lines deeper, fainter, others close to the surface and brighter. A structure, or something that had grown into one. The temperature dropped further. My breath fogged faintly in front of me, though it wasn't cold enough for that. Not really. It was as if the heat was being drawn downward, into the ground. The next pulse came with a sound. Not something we heard at first, but something we felt, a pressure, like a distant bass note. Then, gradually, it resolved into something audible, a low, rhythmic tone that rose and fell with the light. It wasn't mechanical. It had an irregularity to it, a subtle variation that made it feel intentional. "Alive. Is it communicating?" someone said. I couldn't tell who. "No," Mark said quickly. "No, it's just resonance. Some kind of natural." The ground beneath him brightened again, more intensely than before. The light concentrated directly under his feet, forming a dense cluster of intersecting lines. Mark stepped back. The light followed, not spread, followed. It condensed and shifted, tracking his movement with unsettling precision. The vibration increased in frequency, the low tone rising slightly in pitch. "Don't move," Lena said. He didn't listen. He took another step back, then another, faster now. The light kept pace, always just beneath him, as if tethered. "Why is it doing that?" he asked, his voice breaking. No one answered. My own attention had been drawn elsewhere. The rest of the forest floor was changing. Where there had been isolated pulses before, there was now a faint, continuous glow, spreading outward from our campsite in a wide, slow expansion. The network beneath the soil was lighting up in sections, like a map being revealed piece by piece. And it wasn't random. The illuminated lines formed arcs, circles, concentric rings, centered on us. I felt the vibration shift, no longer just a vertical tremor but something more complex, moving laterally through the ground. It created a strange sensation in my legs, like standing in shallow water with a current brushing past. The sound deepened, layering over itself. There were multiple tones now, slightly out of sync, creating a low, dissonant chord that seemed to press against my ears. "It's reacting to all of us," Lena said. Not just him. She was right. As we shifted, even slightly, the light adjusted. Brighter where we stood, dimmer where we didn't. It was mapping us, tracing our positions in real time. A thought came to me then, unbidden and unwelcome: not mapping. Measuring. The air felt thicker. Each breath took more effort, as if the forest itself had grown denser around us. The trees loomed at the edge of the campsite, their trunks dark and vertical, their upper branches lost in the deepening night. For a moment, I had the disorienting impression that they were leaning inward, subtly, almost imperceptibly. The next pulse was the strongest yet. The ground flared with light, bright enough to cast shadows upward onto the undersides of leaves. For an instant, the entire network beneath the soil was visible, an intricate lattice of lines and nodes, far more complex than I'd imagined. And at the center of it, directly beneath us, something larger. A shape, not clearly defined, but distinct from the rest. A dense cluster where the lines converged, forming a rough, circular mass. The light there was different, steadier, more intense. Watching, the vibration surged, and this time it carried a distinct pattern. Not random, not natural, it came in intervals, repeating with slight variations. Like a signal, my chest tightened as the realization settled in. It wasn't just reacting to us. It was responding. "Step away," I said, though I wasn't sure from what. Lena grabbed my arm. "Look." She pointed toward the edge of the campsite, where the glow had spread into the surrounding forest. The concentric rings extended far beyond us now, each one pulsing in sequence, moving outward like ripples. Except they didn't fade. They kept going, deeper into the trees, where we couldn't see. The sound followed them, a rolling wave of low tones that diminished with distance but never fully disappeared. It echoed back, faintly, as if something far out there was answering. A return signal. Mark had stopped moving. The light beneath him had stabilized, no longer chasing but holding steady, bright and unwavering. He stood rigid, staring down at his feet. "It's warm," he said. I felt a jolt of something close to panic. "What?" "The ground," he said. "It's warm now." That wasn't possible. Everything else had grown colder, the air biting against exposed skin. But as I focused, I realized he was right, at least for him. A faint shimmer rose around his boots, distorting the air just above the soil. The rest of us stood in the cold. He stood over heat. "It's isolating him," Lena said, her voice barely audible. "No," I said, though I didn't believe it. "It's just." The light beneath Mark intensified again, and this time the ground shifted. Not a collapse, not a break, just a subtle, almost fluid motion, as if the soil had softened. His foot sank slightly, no more than an inch, but enough to make him flinch. "Hey," he started. The vibration spiked, sharp enough to make my teeth ache. The tones converged into a single, resonant frequency that seemed to lock into place. Mark froze. For a moment, everything held. The light, the sound, the air. Then the ground beneath him pulsed, not outward, not along the network, but upward, a brief, concentrated surge that lifted the soil around his boots before settling back. When it did, the light dimmed. Not entirely, just enough. The concentric rings continued their outward progression, carrying the signal deeper into the forest. The central glow beneath us faded to a low, steady pulse, like a heartbeat at rest. Mark looked down. Slowly, he lifted one foot. The soil released him easily. No resistance, no sign that anything had changed, except for the faint imprint left behind. It wasn't a footprint, The ground where he'd stood had been rearranged. The thin layer of leaves and dirt had shifted into a shallow depression, its edges too smooth, too deliberate. And within it, faintly glowing, was a pattern. Lines, intersecting, curving, mirroring the network beneath, but simplified. Reduced. A mark. We didn't speak. None of us moved. Out beyond the campsite, the last of the glowing rings slipped into the darkness between the trees. The returning tones faded with them, leaving only the low, steady pulse beneath our feet. I stared at the impression in the soil, at the way the lines formed a shape that felt almost familiar, though I couldn't place why. Then I realized, it wasn't a symbol meant to be recognized. It was a record, and somewhere out there, in the vast, unseen network stretching beneath the forest, something had just learned the shape of him. Their campfire burned silently, casting no heat. At first, none of us said anything about it. The fire looked right, small, controlled, built in the shallow iron ring bolted into the gravel pad at Site 17. Mark had stacked the wood carefully, kindling arranged just so, and I'd watched him strike the lighter, the flame catching cleanly. It rose the way it should, licking along the bark, settling into a steady burn. But the sound never came. No crackle, no soft collapse of embers. Just the faint suggestion of movement, like a video playing with the audio stripped out. I held my hands out toward it anyway, more out of habit than expectation. The air between my palms and the flame felt unchanged, cool, still. Not even the illusion of warmth. You feel that? Lena asked. She was sitting across from me on one of the low metal benches, her knees drawn up, hands hovering just inches from the fire. Yeah, I said. Or, I don't. Mark gave a short laugh. Maybe it's just weak wood. It'll pick up. He nudged one of the logs with a stick. The flame shifted, brightening briefly where he touched it, but there was still no sound. No shower of sparks, no shifting ash. Behind us, the campground stretched in neat, quiet order. Gravel pads like ours, each marked with a small wooden post and a number. A few other sites were occupied, faint silhouettes of tents, the occasional glow of a lantern, but everything felt distant, as though we were separated by more than just a few dozen meters of trees. I glanced at the sign nailed to a post near the road, 17. The number was faded, edges worn smooth by weather. Wind's dead, Lena said. That might be why it's so quiet. But even as she said it, a light breeze stirred the leaves overhead. I could hear it moving through the canopy, a soft, dry whisper, but the fire didn't respond. The flames didn't lean or flicker in the direction of the wind. They held their shape, steady and upright, as if insulated from the world around them. I leaned forward slightly, watching more closely. The light was wrong. It illuminated the stones of the fire ring, the gravel at its base, even the edges of our boots. But it didn't cast shadows the way it should have. The shapes it created were faint, diffuse, like reflections rather than projections. Do you see that? I asked. Mark looked up from his hands. See what? The shadows. There. Off. He frowned, glancing around. Looks fine to me. But Lena nodded slowly. No, I see it. It's like everything's lit from the same angle. We all turned, instinctively, to check behind us. The trees stood in layered darkness, their trunks rising into a sky that was just beginning to lose its last traces of blue. There should have been deeper pockets of shadow, places where the firelight couldn't reach. There weren't. Everything within a certain radius of the fire was evenly lit, as if the glow wasn't coming from a single point but from the air itself. I pulled my jacket tighter around me. The temperature had dropped, though I couldn't remember when exactly. My breath fogged faintly as I exhaled, a thin plume that dissipated quickly. That's not right, Mark said, noticing it too. It's not that cold. I held my hands closer to the fire, almost touching the flames now. Still nothing. No warmth, no sting. Just the same cool air, unchanged. You'd feel something, Lena said. Even a little. Mark stood, brushing gravel from his palms. Okay, this is weird. I'm adding more wood. He grabbed another log from the pile and set it carefully onto the burning stack. The flames rose to meet it, wrapping around the wood in smooth, fluid motions. No crackle, no hiss of sap, no shift in temperature. It burned like an image of fire, not the thing itself. The silence around us deepened. I became aware of how little we could hear beyond the campsite. The breeze in the trees had faded, or maybe it hadn't, maybe it just wasn't reaching us anymore. Even the distant sounds from other campers, voices, zippers, footsteps on gravel, had gone thin and indistinct. It's like everything's muffled, Lena said. She clapped her hands once, sharply. The sound was wrong. Dull, truncated, as if it had been absorbed before it could fully form. It didn't echo. It didn't carry. Mark tried it too, louder. The result was the same, a flat, stifled noise that seemed to fall straight to the ground. That's not normal, he said. I shook my head, my attention drifting back to the fire. The flames were changing, not in size or color, but in rhythm. They flickered now, subtly, in a pattern that didn't match any movement of air or fuel. A slow, steady pulse, brightening, dimming, brightening again. In time with something. I listened, straining to hear past the silence. At first, there was nothing. Then, gradually, I felt it rather than heard it, a low, almost imperceptible vibration beneath the soles of my boots. It rose through the gravel, through the packed earth beneath, a faint, steady thrum. The fire pulsed in sync with it. Do you feel that? I asked. Lena nodded immediately. Mark hesitated, then nodded too, his expression tightening. It's coming from the ground, he said. The vibration was subtle, but once I focused on it, I couldn't ignore it. It had a rhythm to it, like a slow heartbeat, each pulse followed by a brief stillness. The fire matched it perfectly. Bright, dim, bright. It's not reacting to the wind, Lena said quietly. It's reacting to that. Mark stepped closer to the edge of the fire ring, peering down into the coals. Maybe there's something under here. Pipes, or, there aren't pipes in a campground, I said. He didn't respond. The gravel at the base of the ring shifted slightly, just a faint settling, but enough to catch my eye. For a moment, I thought it was just the vibration dislodging loose stones. Then it happened again, not random this time. A small cluster of gravel near the edge moved inward, as if drawn toward the center. The pieces slid over one another with a soft, dry scrape that we almost didn't hear. Did you see that? Lena whispered. Mark nodded slowly. Yeah. The fire flared slightly, brighter than before, and for an instant I thought I saw something beneath it, not wood, not coals, but a darker shape, obscured by the flame. The vibration deepened, the rhythm tightening. The pulses came closer together now, less like a heartbeat and more like a measured signal. I became aware of my own breathing again, how it seemed too loud in the quiet. Each inhale felt like it interrupted something, like stepping into the middle of a conversation. Step back, I said. Neither of them moved. The fire flickered again, more sharply this time, and the light it cast shifted, not outward, but downward. The glow seemed to sink into the ground, illuminating the edges of the fire ring from below. For a moment, I could see past the layer of gravel and dirt. There were lines beneath it, not roots, too straight, too deliberate. They formed a pattern, branching outward from directly under the fire, spreading in thin, interconnected paths. The light followed them, tracing their shapes as it pulsed. It's not just here, Lena said, her voice barely audible. It goes out, everywhere. The lines extended beyond the edge of the pad, disappearing into the surrounding forest. Each pulse sent a wave of light along them, traveling outward in all directions. The vibration carried with it, a low, resonant tone that pressed against my ears. Is it communicating? Mark asked. No one answered. The fire brightened again, and this time the shape beneath it became clearer, not a solid object, but a dense convergence of those lines, clustered tightly together. A center, a node. The pulses changed. They came in sequences now, short, long, short, repeating with slight variations. A pattern. It's not random, I said. It's responding. To what? Lena asked. I didn't have to think about it. To us. As if to confirm it, the vibration shifted the moment I spoke. The next pulse came stronger, the light flaring higher, reaching just past the edge of the ring. The air around us grew colder, sharper. My breath thickened, hanging longer before fading. Mark took a step back. The fire reacted instantly. The flames stretched toward him, elongating unnaturally, the light following his movement without changing its source. The pulse quickened, matching the pace of his retreat. Why is it doing that? He said, his voice tight. Don't move, Lena said. He froze. The fire settled slightly, the rhythm slowing, stabilizing. It's tracking us, I said. The realization settled heavily in my chest. The pulses weren't just happening, they were adjusting, aligning with our movements, our voices, even our stillness. Measuring. The gravel shifted again, more noticeably this time. A small depression formed at the base of the fire, the stones sliding inward as if something beneath them was pulling, reshaping. The light sank deeper, illuminating the lines below with greater clarity. They weren't just lines. They were arranged, organized into concentric patterns that radiated outward from the fire, each ring pulsing in sequence, carrying the signal into the forest. I looked up. Beyond the campsite, the trees stood unnaturally still, their silhouettes sharp against the darkening sky. For a moment, I had the distinct impression that they were angled toward us, subtly, like something listening. The returning pulse came faintly, from far out in the forest. An echo, answering. Mark's voice dropped to a whisper. This isn't our fire. No one argued. The flames burned on, silent and cold, their light sinking into the ground, feeding into the network beneath us. Each pulse carried something with it, not heat, not sound, but information. A record. I stared into the center of the fire, at the place where the lines converged. It wasn't consuming the wood. The logs hadn't changed. No charring, no collapse. They sat intact within the flames, untouched. It's not burning anything, Lena said, following my gaze. No, I said. Another pulse. Stronger. The pattern shifted again, more complex now, as if refining itself. Waiting. Understanding. The realization came slowly, but once it did, it felt inevitable. We hadn't built this. We hadn't started it. The fire didn't belong to us. It had been here before we arrived, waiting beneath the gravel, beneath the iron ring, beneath the thin layer of dirt. Waiting for weight, for movement, for voices. For something to measure. For something to answer. The flames rose once more, silent and steady, and for a moment, I could almost hear it, not a sound, but an intention, a quiet certainty that settled into the space around us. We weren't gathered around the fire. We were positioned, and it had only just begun to listen.